was mid-November 2021, and me and about 10 friends were camping in the woods in the Sawtooth National Forest near Petite Lake. There were two groups of four people in two tents, and one in a car, and me and my buddy were in hammocks near the edge of the camp. It's about 1 a.m., and we all had been sleeping for about 2 hours. I wake up to my hammock mate panting extremely heavily and yelling my name. I'm confused and get up and help him. He's paralyzed by fear. He said that he had an extremely vivid dream that there was a black figure, tall and slender, trying to break into his car after he had seen his figure decapitate me and the rest of his friends. He said that he woke up to the figure near the car and saw all of our heads stuck on sticks throughout the camp. He proceeded. He said to click the car alarm button, and the figure began to run circles around the car and then stopped, then dashed off extremely quickly into the woods. I was obviously freaked out at this point, and I immediately felt very uneasy, but I told him it was just a bad dream and that he needs to go back to sleep. Him and I tried for about 5 minutes, both stricken with fear at this point, when we hear our friend in the tent begin to yell, "No, no, don't take me!" We had not woken anyone else in the camp at this point. This freaked me and my buddy out quite a bit, because we had no idea what was going on. We were also very vulnerable in our hammocks by ourselves. We were about 50 yards away from the camp. Our buddy's yells proceed to wake up most of the rest of the camp, and we found out that our friend in the car that had my buddy said clicked the alarm, clicked the car alarm was awake. So all of us, scared and awake, have a conversation about what is going on. The buddy in the car says that he heard scratching on the window and heard something pull the door. He also said that he had seen the black figure running around the car as well. We were all freaked out at this point, decided to move in the same tent. Our friend with the dream also claimed a similar murder story to the friend in the hammock. The next morning we all talked, and so many of us experienced what happened that night, 6 in total, that we determined that it must have been some sort of being that was giving us nightmares. We called it a Wendigo, but we have no idea. We also had friends that stayed at the same site about 6 months earlier, and a few of them did notice weird things happening at camp at night, like feelings of being watched, or feeling of a being walking around their tent. Strange stuff in the Idaho mountains. I live in Utah. I'm pretty sure I had an encounter with a skinwalker or a Wendigo. I'm 25 years old. I live in Utah, and I'm curious if any of you have seen anything like this before. I'm pretty sure I saw a Wendigo or a skinwalker. I know it sounds strange or even crazy. I don't really believe in those things, and I'm regularly skeptical when it comes to the paranormal. This happened to me when I was 17 and in high school, living with my parents. My house at the time was in a very small town. The backyard faced open, empty fields and mountains for miles before you reached another civilization at all. My best friend lived next door and shared this field as our backyard in a way. I have to explain that his house was built on a different street that ended in the field with a small cul-de-sac. I think there were supposed to be more houses built down the street to expand the town, but they clearly never got around to it. So his driveway was basically in this cul-de-sac, even though no other houses were built there. I used to stay the night at my friend's house a lot in high school because I didn't have the best relationship with my parents. Every once in a while, we would wake up to hear dragging and a weird gargling sound from the back porch. His room was in the basement with the window well to the back porch. It would happen maybe a couple times a month. Whenever we would gather the courage to check, nothing would be back there. This happened for years. One night haunts my friend and I to this day. My friend was getting ready to move, and we would stay up all night playing games and watching movies. We decided to go on a music drive to just vibe. So we hopped in his truck with high beams and swung out of the driveway, turning them on toward the field to use the roundabout. The light illuminated this thing. It looked like a person, but it wasn't. It was naked on all fours, abnormally large, particularly its limbs that seemed to fold under itself in an unnatural way. Its pale skin clung to it like it had to be stretched onto it. But the part that still sends shivers down my spine is its face. Its jaw hung open to this gasping black maw, like a snake unhinging its jaw to eat. Its black eyes glistened in the light as it looked at us, but just as it turned to see us, it quickly scurried backwards, almost like it was on a rewind, into the bush of the field. My friend and I were pale as ghosts. We both looked at each other like, "Did you see that too?" We were shaken. Let's just say we tried to have a good rest of the night, but we couldn't believe what we saw. We ended up just sitting there in his basement with guns ready and waiting to hear the gargling and dragging again, but we never did. I don't live in that town anymore. There are times when I visit there though. The empty field still feels like it's watching and waiting, even though I can't see it, and still feel like it's out there. When I was about 10 years old, I was hunting with my grandfather on family owned land near Covington, Michigan. It was near dusk, and we've been sitting for a couple hours now. We haven't seen much, just a spiker and a small doe, nothing large enough to shoot. We were starting to lose hope, and we were getting ready to start the 1 mile trek back to our cabin. As we were preparing to leave, we heard some twigs cracking from our right rear side. The stand we were in was tucked in the rear corner of a large clearing on one of the bigger trees in the tree line. As the cracks from the twigs got closer, I remember realizing that all other ambient noises stopped. When the creature finally emerged from the tree line, I remember my heart feeling like it stopped working, and an overwhelming feeling of dread washed over me. What I saw was what looked to be a small buck that looked like it hadn't eaten in weeks and was extremely pale brown, almost gray with what looked to be a broken neck and missing antler. At this time, the sun was just about to sink below the treetops and cover the clearing with shadows. I recall looking over at my grandfather and seeing a level of fear I have never seen on his face before. Mind you, my grandfather was tough and fearless as they come, being he's seen active duty in Vietnam as infantry. After seeing my grandfather's face, it just made the feeling in my stomach become worse. As we watched this deer stumble into the clearing, my grandfather reached for his binoculars. As he pulled them out, the lens cover made a small noise on the side of the stand. The creature must have heard it because it stopped its stumble, creepily rotated around, and rose up on its hind legs and stared directly at us for about a minute before running off in a creepily awkward sprint into the woods. At this time, it felt like I had just gotten the wind knocked out of me, and I was petrified with fear. After the encounter, me and my grandfather sat in the stand, completely silent, staring at the clearing, trying to make sense of what we had just witnessed. As we started to walk back, we heard extremely weird, almost human-sounding noises coming from the woods around us. By the time we got back to the cabin, grandfather decided it'd be best to call our trip early and head back home. But before we left, I had to use the bathroom, and our cabin was quite old, so I didn't have indoor plumbing, just an old outhouse. As I sat down to use the toilet, the immense feeling of dread returned as I heard human-like whispers and small scratches on the back of the outhouse. I screamed at the top of my lungs to my grandfather as I ran out of the outhouse crying. After that, we drove back home and had a small discussion on what we just saw. Despite being an avid hunter, that was my grandfather's last season of hunting, and about a year later, we sold the land. I've told this story a couple times to close friends and family, but I think most of them think I'm crazy. especially being the only witness now that my grandfather has passed away. Still, to this day, the encounter sends shivers down my spine every time I think about it.